Hi, this is a video looking at EDUQAS Paper 2 GCSE English Language. This is a reading and writing exam. You've got 2 hours for it, 1 hour for the reading, 1 hour for the writing, but you can do it in either order. If you have extra time, you basically get an extra half an hour. So in the reading, you've got 2 extracts to read, one from the 21st century and one from the 19th century. And basically questions 1 and 2 will be the 21st, 3 and 4 will be the 19th, and 5 and 6 will be looking at both extracts. So here's how the sort of exam looks at. So what I mean by find info is that it will be like an easy question. So for example, how much time do the men spend skiing each day? You look through the text, you try to find the answer. So for example, if it's 12 hours, you can just put 12 hours. So we've got 3 of those kind of questions. We've got 2 questions worth 10 marks where we're saying how the writer is doing something. And number 6 is comparing the 2 texts. You must time manage in the exam. Probably the most important thing to do in the exam is time manage. Keep looking at the clock all the way through and only use the time allowed for each question. So basically, if it's a 3 or 4 mark question, you're looking for 4 or 5 minutes. If it's a 10 mark question, 13 to 15. Okay, you must look at how much the exam question's worth, and you must keep an eye on the clock. So why do we want a lot of quotes? So in the 10 mark questions, basically the examiner loves quotes. So in this, we've got 2 examples here, both from previous students, both probably as good as English as each other. However, example 1 didn't really get into his head that he had to use a lot of quotes, so because of his 4 quotes, he only get 3 out of 10. Well, the second person used 9 quotes, so got 9 out of 10. So it's really important to use as many quotes as you can. So question 1. Question 1 is the find information one. So basically you've got a text like that. This is about Ben Fogle going to the South Pole. So you read a text like that, and then you've got 3 questions. And all you've got to do is make sure you answer the question. So for example, why did Ben Fogle think he was going to die on his journey to the South Pole? And then it says in the text, he walked onto a dangerous crevasse. How much time did the men spend skiing? Find it in the text, it was 16 hours. How did James Cracknell cope with the long days on the expedition? So find a bit about James Cracknell, and it said he listened to Andrew Marr's History of the Modern Britain. So we don't need any PEs, just find the question, find the answer, and write it down. If you can't find this question in the text, just leave it. So for example, if you find A, B, but you can't find C, just leave it. It's only worth 1 mark. Leave a space and go back to it at the end of the exam. So question 2. So question 2 is 13 to 15 minutes. Question 2 will always be a 10 mark question. So try to find 7 to 10 quotes. And to be honest, they're quite similar. All the how questions are quite similar, and they'll be quite similar to the ones on paper 1. So an example would be, how does the writer make these lines tense and dramatic? So on the how question overview, it's basically find 7 to 10 quotes and explain why you've picked that quote to the reader, so why that quote is tense and dramatic, and trying to do, even though I've said to do 7 to 10, basically do as many examples you can in 13 minutes. Once your 13 minutes are up, move on to the next question. So comments from past exams for the examiner report, they said too much time on low mark questions, so that means people were spending 15 minutes on a 5 mark question. You can't do that. More quotes, so this is a direct quote from the head of the exam board, and she said plenty of quotes gives a student high marks. So literally the person who makes the exam is telling you you need to put loads of quotes in, and you need to take quotes from across the whole extract. I'll talk about that more later. So you need to use a range of quotes like I just said, okay, from the beginning, middle, or the end. So if you took 7 or 8 quotes just from this part, just from the first part, you will get marked down. You've got to make sure you take quotes from all over the text. So the how question is all about zooming in on keywords and thinking why the writer has used them. So to get a grade 5 or above answer, use a quote, say why it makes the writing seem exciting and dramatic, 1 or 2 sentences per quote, no waffle along PE. So what we want is 8 or 9 2-sentence points about 8 or 9 quotes, not 2 huge PEs about 2 quotes, because we know the examiner loves quotes. So really sort of obvious example, little intro to this question is, say for example my question was, how does the writer present the wife? So I've got that sentence, okay, so let's look how the word or the verb spoke changes. So for example, if it said the woman shouted at her husband, the wife might be presented as angry. If the woman whispered to her husband, we might say the wife is secretive. If it said the woman screamed when she saw her husband, it might mean the woman is scared of her husband. If it said the woman rolled her eyes, it might mean she's bored or fed up with her husband. So this is what that question is all about. It's all about picking out words and saying why the writer has used them. So example question would be, how does the writer make the weather seem scary to the boy with the quote, the rain thumped against the window? So the word we were zooming on there is thumped. It could have said the rain touched the window, the rain hit the window. It said thumped. Why has the writer decided to do that? If it said the rain tapped against the window, a tap is something soft like this little cat. A soft little thing, or your foot, you tap to music. That wouldn't be particularly scary. It'd probably be light rain like this, wouldn't it? So just tapping the window. However, the writer didn't use the word tapped, they've used the word thumped. And when we think of thumped, we think of this, don't we? So we think of power, strength, anger, and that kind of rain, really hard rain. So a really simple PE would be, the word thumped makes the storm seem strong, angry and punishing, because that is with the connotations of the word thumped. So we've got our quote here, and then we've got our explanation about why it seems scary to the boy. So the question we're going to look at as an example in this video is, how does the writer try to show that Mike Perham's voyage was really tough? You should write about what the writer tells us, the words and phrases. And basically, you don't need to read the extract, but if you wanted to, it's about a 17-year-old boy who sails around the world on his own. So in this question, then you've got to zoom in on where the writer deliberately used words to make Mike's voyage or trip seem tough, hard, or difficult, something really hard for him to do. So there's the article. If you want to zoom in and pause it, feel free. But basically, you've got a couple of minutes after reading it. Highlight 7 to 10 quotes that make the voyage sound tough, hard or difficult. Okay, remember in this question, use a quote and say what makes the writing seem tough. 1 or 2 sentences per quote, no waffle or long PEs. Try to do 7 to 10 or as many as you can do in 13 minutes. So one quote I'm going to pick out, okay, is Mike had huge blisters on his hands from day one. So why did the writer bother telling us that? Okay, well basically if you have huge blisters like the ones in this photo, it's going to make your trip tough, isn't it? Because he's sailing around the world, took him 9 months. If you've got those on your hands, it's going to be pretty painful, isn't it? And it also says from day one, which suggests it happened literally from the start. So the whole trip he had him like that. Okay, so I've put, the writer makes the voyage seem tough by describing Mike having huge blisters on his hands from day one. There's my quote. Why have I put it in there? Why did it make the trip sound tough? I put, this tells the reader he was in pain all the way through the trip. Very simple point. Another one I'm going to talk about is that it says in the trip that Mike did the trip solo. Why did the writer bother putting that? Mike could have done the trip with 20 or 30 people helping him, but he didn't. He did it on his own. Yeah, so he didn't have anyone helping him. Yeah, he probably would have got lonely. If something had to happen with the boat at 3 a.m, he couldn't rely on anyone else to do it. He had to do it. So I've put, it seems tough with the word solo. This means Mike did the whole trip alone with no help from others. This student gives a quote and explains why it makes the trip tough. So that would have easily got a point. I've clicked the word solo and I've linked to why does it make it difficult. Another one, Mike experienced monstrous storms. It could have just said Mike experienced storms or Mike experienced big storms, but the writer has chosen to use the word monstrous. Okay, so why have they bothered doing that? So you could say monstrous suggests that the waves are scary or huge or giant, because that's what we think a monster to be. Another one was the weather was torture for Mike. It could have just said the weather was bad for Mike. Why has the writer chosen the word torture? What connotations does torture have? Well, pain, agony, punishment. So I put, the voyage seems tough with the word torture. This shows the voyage was agony for Mike, because I've linked the word agony to torture. Okay, really important point. If you're running out of time, I told you need to try and do 7 to 10 quotes. But if your 13 minutes are up and you've only done 1 or 2 quotes, forget the final part of the PEE. So what I mean by that is, if the quote is he does get lonely, my PEE could be, if I have enough time, I could write, Mike says he is lonely on the trip. This makes it seem tough as Mike has no one to talk to when he's feeling low. So I'll explain that. But if you're struggling for time and you've only done 1 or 2 quotes, try to put 4 or 5 quotes in really quickly that show it's tough, but you're not really explaining it. So for example, instead of putting Mike says he's lonely on the trip, this makes it seem tough, blah, 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 blah. Just put, another way it seems tough is when Mike says he was lonely on the trip, and don't explain it. Yeah, so obviously we want you to do really good PEs, but if you're running out of time, you've only used a couple of quotes, just try and do 3 or 4 like I've put in the blue. And there's some more. I've put monstrous makes it sound like the weather was scary and powerful. I've put this makes it seem tough as Mike had no one to talk to when he was feeling low. That's about lonely. He battled 50-foot waves. I put this suggests the waves are gigantic and Mike had to fight against them and the boat went berserk. So I've zoomed in on berserk and I've put this is tough as it makes the boat sound unpredictable and scary. Okay, so here's another one if you want to go have a go on your own. This is the question of why should horse racing be banned. So if you want to pause the video and have a look at yourself at that, then have a look at that. Otherwise I'm just going to carry on. So pause if you want to look at that in a bit more detail. So again, why do we want a lot of quotes on this question? Well, basically the examiner gives you a lot of marks for doing it. So make sure you do as many quotes as possible. So question 3, okay, I'm not really going to talk about question 3 too much. It's literally the same as question 1, but it's on the different extract. So for example, what animals did Scott have on the expedition with him? The answer is ponies. You can just put ponies. Okay, question 4. Okay, question 4, an example. Joe Simpson was involved in the tense and dramatic situation. How far do you agree with this view? It's worth 10 marks. Okay, important thing about question 4 is it's basically the same as question 2, the one we just looked at, the how question. The only difference is that you should really give your opinion and, to be perfectly honest, agree with the question. So the extract that we looked at in the class was about Joe Simpson's breaking his leg and basically struggling to survive. So really there's no way that you can say it's not tense and it's not dramatic because it's about someone dying basically or nearly dying. So agree with the question at the start of your PE. So if that was a typical PE in the question 2, the use of the word thump suggests the storm seems strong, angry and punishing to the boy. In question 4 we just want to add the red bit showing you agree with the reader. You probably don't have to do that on all the PEs. Remember you're trying to do 7 to 10, but some of them at least. Okay, so the question again then, Joe Simpson was involved in a tense and dramatic situation, do you agree? And the extract was basically about someone breaking his leg. So let's just look at the first paragraph. Yeah, obviously in the exam you'd have to read the whole page and do 7 to 10, but let's just do it on the first paragraph for this video. Okay, so I'll very quickly read it. I hit the slope at the base of the cliff before I saw it coming. I was facing onto the slope and both knees locked as I struck it. I felt a shattering blow in my knee, felt bones splitting and screamed. The impact catapulted me over backwards and down the slope of the east face. I slid head first on my back. The rushing speed of it confused me. I thought of the drop below but felt nothing. Simon would be ripped off the mountain. He couldn't hold this. I screamed again as I jerked to a sudden violent stop. Everything was still silent, my thoughts raced madly. Then pain flooded down my thigh, a fierce burning fire coming down the inside of my thigh, seeming to ball in my groin, building and building until I cried out at it, and my breathing came in ragged gasps, my leg. So if you don't know Touching the Void, this is an extract where 2 people are climbing a mountain and one of them breaks their leg. So Joe is the name of the person who breaks his leg and Simon is the person with him. So let's pick out a few things. So I've picked out shattering. It could have just said I felt a blow in my knee. They've put shattering, so basically shocking. It was shocking to him and torn to pieces. They put catapulted, which shows that he went fast and powerfully down the mountain. His bones splitting, so that's a horrible image. So splitting suggests pain and agony, that his leg's basically broken into 2. So to write a grade 5 answer in this question, it's the same as the how question. Basically agree with it before, use a quote and say why it makes it dramatic, 1 or 2 sentences per quote. So we want 8 or 9 quotes if possible, not 2 PEs, about 2 quotes. Okay, so I felt a shattering blow in my knee. So why is it could have just said I felt a blow. Why is the writer put shattering in there? Well, if something shatters, it does this, doesn't it? It breaks into pieces like Beyonce did, or it does this. So this is basically the writer saying this is what happened to his knee. So I've put, I agree the writer makes it tense with the quote, shattering blow in my knee. This suggests Joe's leg was blown to pieces. So this student has received a mark for linking the word shattering to Joe's knee being blown to pieces. So my green is my link to my question, my blue is my quote, and my red is my explanation. Okay, another one, it says that Joe, it didn't say Joe said, it didn't say Joe shouted, it said Joe screamed. So I put, I agree with the writer makes it tense by saying Joe screamed. What are the connotations of screamed? Pain, agony. I put, this suggests Joe is in agony from the pain in his knee. So again, this student has received a mark for linking the word scream to Joe being in agony. My green is my question, my blue is my quote, my red is my explanation. Okay, another one. He says, my knee exploded. It could have said my knee broke or my knee was in pain. They've used the word exploded. Okay, so I've put, the writer makes it dramatic by saying Joe's knee exploded. This tells us his knee erupted violently like a bomb. So if you said what kind of things explode? So a bomb explodes, or a volcano you could talk about. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few more. I won't do these ones because I've done these ones. So I've also put my leg, ellipsis, my leg. This suggests Joe is screaming and can only focus on the pain he's feeling because he's using repetition. I've put, later on in the article, it says his leg looked grotesque. So I've put the word grotesque is used to describe Joe's knee. This suggests to the reader it now looks disgustingly distorted and out of place. And he also says in a short sentence towards the end, I'm dead. And I put the short sentence, I'm dead, makes it tense as it suggests Joe's certain he will die and there's no way out of the situation. Okay, question 5. This is the first question when we look at two texts. However, we're not comparing, but it's worth 4 marks. Remember, if it's a low mark question, that means we're just finding information in the text. So this is the same as question 1 and 3, but it's for both texts, like I just said. No PEs needed. Remember, you only need PEs on the 10 mark questions. So key info about question 5, it's for both texts. There's 4 marks available. It's 4 or 5 minutes. You don't have to compare in this question. So it doesn't say compare. We do that in question 6. So we don't need to use words like however or likewise. We're just gaining the information. Okay, so the question we're going to look at is from the Ben Fogel exam again, and it says at the top, to answer the following questions you will need to use both texts. And the question says, explain what we learn about the food Scott and Fogel took them on their expedition to the South Pole. So all you need to do is look at both extracts. Remember, by this point you have already read both extracts. You look at both extracts, highlight what they say about food and just put them into a sentence. So for example, Fogel had lots of food: salami, chocolate, cheese, chicken, spaghetti bolognese. Scott had ration meat, biscuit and a thin breakfast. That is it. That's all you have to do in this question. All it is testing you is that you can find information to both texts. You don't have to do any PEs. You don't have to do what the writer is suggesting. Just find, it's 4 marks, so find 5 or 6 quotes and just put them into a sentence like this. Okay, question 6. So question 6, you do have to compare. It's 13 to 15 minutes. This is the question people do get the worst mark on, basically because it's the last question, not for particularly any reason that it's hard. It says both of these texts give an account of a mining rescue, and it does use the word compare. So compare what the writers tell us about what happened on the day when the miners were rescued, how the writers try to show the drama of the day. It's emboldened on the question day, so that means you only look for stuff that happened on the day. Anything that happened after or before, you don't bother. This exam was basically about to mine 2 different times when a mine collapsed and the men survived. Okay, so it's the last question in the exam. Okay, it's basically asking you what the writers say about the day of the mine and how they say it. Okay, you need to compare the text, saying what's the similarities and differences. If it was me, I will try to find the similarities first. So to find 3 or 4 similarities. If you can't find any more similarities, do a difference. You're going to do a PE. Use comparing words like however or likewise. 10 marks available, 13 to 15 minutes. All the other ones I've been telling you to do 7 to 10 quotes. With this one, if we can find 4 or 5 quotes, we'll be doing okay. So remember, on this question, if you're struggling for time, just do the first bullet point. So like I said earlier in the video, don't worry with the final E of the PEE. So just find stuff that happened on the day if you're struggling. Be clear which text you're talking about. If the examiner's confused, you get 0 marks. You will have already read both texts in the exam, so you'll be familiar with them, so you'll just be skimming. Don't worry if you feel like you're repeating points you've already written in past questions. So say, for example, question 2, you've written about something that happened on the day of the mine. Don't worry if you're repeating it for this question. So in this question, if I was you, you're highlighting the text for anything that happened on the day the miners were rescued. So we're not going to go and then sell it out like this. So say what the Chilean article said, then tell me if it's likewise or other, and then the Victorian. So say, for example, I said in the Chilean article, all the men survived. And then that was the same Victorian article. So I put in a Chilean article, all the men survived, give a quote. Then I put likewise, and then say in the Victorian article, everyone survived, and then give a quote. Okay, so I've put, one point I'm going to make is that when the men survived and they came out of the mine, that the crowd were happy. So I've put in the Chilean article, it says there were scenes of jubilation, which shows there was great happiness. Likewise, I'm showing the examiner it's a similarity. I put in the Victorian article, it says there is a joyous burst of feeling. So if I put that into a PE, I've got my extract 1, quote and explanation there, my extract 2, quote and explanation there, and then I've got my word there to say if it's a similarity or a difference. Do lots of short PEs in the reading exam, so we want 7 to 10 PEs as opposed to one big PE. Do lots of quotes, and when your time is up on a question, move on. Okay, I hope that has been some use to you, and good luck in your exams.